Hello and welcome into the first episode of The Roar Within, the TU Sports Podcast presented to you by the Trinitonian. I'm Scott Lebo, sports reporter with the Trinitonian and now podcaster. And I'm joined today by Cole Isaacson.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
All right. So the idea of this podcast is we're going to focus on people at Trinity, athletes, coaches, and how people are connected to sports and just the love of sports in general. We'll have a number of segments that we continue to do week after week, and the podcast probably will evolve over time to have more episodes and more different types of things. But to start off with, every week, we're going to bring in athletes of the week and then review the games that have happened in recent times and preview the games that are coming up. But to start with athlete of the week, Cole, do you got an athlete of the week for us?
Oh, yeah, I do. Mr. Cal Coney on the baseball team. Plays second base normally. Didn't start we're recording on Monday before this is released. So last night's game for us against Texas Lutheran University in Seguin. Game 2, down 5-4. Comes up to the plate with the go-ahead run on second base. Comes through with a double down the right field line to win the game for Trinity. They sweep the doubleheader on Sunday. Still a game to be played on Monday for us. But Cal Coney, my athlete of the week for coming up clutch for the Tigers.
And I'm going to bet that Trinity win tonight's game that hasn't happened for us, but has happened for the podcast when it comes out Friday.
I'm going to speak for the baseball team. You're not very good at betting. We don't want you betting on that.
I'm pretty good at betting.
We don't want you. Nope, bet against them.
My athlete of the week is going to be Christian Green, who has not played for the Trinity men's basketball team in 3 weeks now. But with the SCAC tournament coming around the corner, I'm going to make him my athlete of the week preemptively, trying to give him some good juju. Hope that he is able to play this weekend because we know the team is going to need him. The SCAC is really, really tight this year, and the tournament, anything can happen. So the boys will want Christian Green back in the court. But to preview that and to talk about games that have happened this past weekend, we'll start with basketball. This past Friday, we're in Houston to take on St. Thomas. That was their first loss since 2024. The last day of 2024 was the last time they lost before. This past Friday, they lost to St. Thomas 81-69. Big loss. Trinity men's basketball has been pretty good this year. Potentially, you have Christian Green in that game. Maybe things go differently. But the men went on to play in Colorado on Sunday, and they got the win there by a score of 83-76. Big win. I'm from Colorado. My dad was at that game. He said it was a wild one. I think there were 2 technical fouls and a flagrant foul in the first half, my dad said. So really interesting, hotly contested game there to bring the team into the SCAC tournament. In terms of women's basketball, they were also at St. Thomas on Friday. They lost that game by a score of 63-79. That was one of their biggest losses of the season. Not a great time for them as they will be taking on St. Thomas today, Friday, the 28th of February, in the first round of the SCAC tournament. And then on Sunday in Colorado, the women lost by a score of 52-69. Unfortunately for the women, going into this SCAC tournament, all of the teams that they will be facing or could face in the SCAC tournament, except for one, they lost to this season. Cole, what happened around some other sports?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, baseball played a doubleheader last night for us, Sunday night against TLU, beginning the season with conference play. They came into that series 3-0 as they swept Austin College, which wasn't very surprising, but a big test in Seguin, a big rivalry between those two squads, particularly in baseball. And Tigers rose to the occasion, beating Texas Lutheran 21-7 in Game 1. 10 runs in the third inning, I believe. Run-ruled Texas Lutheran in Seguin.
Yeah, so big, important rivalry type game there. So to win like that is unbelievable. Really sets the tone for this SCAC season.
A really impressive performance. After that game, they were scoring over 20 runs per game over 4 games. And then probably an even more impressive win the next game, a game that ended about 11 p.m. Central Time. They win 6-5, scoring 4 runs in the top of the 9th inning to win. Down 5-2, top 9. They come back and win the game. They win 6-5. Will Hellings getting the save. Cal Coney, as I mentioned before, getting the game-winning hit. But the entire lineup showing up. I believe it was John Ramsey who led things off in that inning, the 9-hole hitter. Cal Coney, I think, was the 6-hole hitter. He was a pinch hitter, so not quite sure on that one. true team effort has to be to come back in an adverse situation like that.
Yeah, unbelievable, important performances from the baseball team this weekend. Not the same for all the ball to bat sports, though.
Softball team, not so fortunate this week. A tough series against Texas Lutheran, 14 ranked in the country. That's who they lost to in the SCAC tournament last season. Game 1, really competitive. They got down 4-0, were able to come back. An inning later, tie the game at 4 with a 4-run inning. Unfortunately for them, losing in extras 6-4. Game 2, not as competitive, though still close through most of the way. Texas Lutheran, a 5-0 victory, scoring some runs later in the game. 0-0 for a long time there. But unfortunately for the Tigers, not able to come up with the win. TLU, obviously a massive challenge, has been for several years, though they've played them really tough. Hopefully they can break through eventually. Game 3 of that series has been rescheduled for, I believe, sometime in March due to the cold weather.
Yeah, and then in terms of other sports where you hit a ball with a foreign object, I don't know, tennis rackets. Men's tennis were at home against number 2 ranked Claremont on Friday. They lost that 6-1. And then on Saturday, the 22nd, women's tennis were at Hardin-Simmons. They won that in a sweeping 7-0 victory. And men's tennis were at home again versus Swarthmore College, number 9 in the country. They lost that by 3-4. Really close affair there. And then on Sunday, they were at number 16, Gustavus Adolphus College. Never heard of them. They're 16th in the country. And the men's tennis team got a 4-3 victory. Their first victory of the weekend, and a good way to finish off the weekend for them. And then in terms of golf, these games will have already happened by the time this comes out, but not for us right now in terms of recording.
Well, women's golf is at the Space City Classic in Houston. I believe that's happening, Monday?
Oh, it's right now.
Well, good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah, go get them.
Go win.
Go golf. And men's golf also at the Space City Classic, happening at this current moment.
Yep. And then also on Tuesday, they will be back.
More golf on Tuesday, Space City Classic for both the men and the women's team. Hopefully they're doing well in Houston. We don't know the results of that. Feel free to look them up after you hear this episode and congratulate anybody you know on the golf team, or maybe say, hey, you get them next time. Go golf.
Yeah, we don't really know.
We don't know.
In terms of the upcoming weekend, SCAC tournament getting started for both men's and women's basketball. The women play today, the 28th, at 2 p.m. They're in Irving, Texas for the tournament. They're playing St. Thomas, who they just lost to make it to the semifinals. It's a very important game. Despite the fact that Trinity lost by 12 in that game, it was close at points. It's been a theme of their season. Just can't find consistency across 4 quarters. 2 or 3 good quarters guaranteed every game, but they seem to find a way to lose it in one of the quarters. But they're back-to-back SCAC champions. And if anybody is going to find a way to bounce back from adversity at the right time, it's a back-to-back champion. And they might just find a way to get past St. Thomas to make their way through this SCAC tournament. For the men, they've got a first-round bye, and they will play against Dallas or Colorado College. One of those two is playing against Concordia, and the winner of that game will face Trinity in the second round. The other of the two teams, Dallas and Colorado College, is playing Shriner in the other quarterfinal. The winner of that game will take on St. Thomas, and then the winner of the semifinals obviously will play in the championship game. Trinity's game will be tomorrow, Saturday, March 1st at 7 p.m. In terms of other sports that are happening this weekend, Cole, what's going on in baseball and softball?
Softball will be hosting the University of Dallas, I believe, on Friday. And then baseball will be at Concordia this weekend up in Austin. So 2 interesting games there, particularly with baseball. Concordia, definitely one of the favorites in the conference. Their first year in the SCAC. Trinity's last year in the SCAC. That should be a very interesting one. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Trinity coming into the year in particular. I think they've answered a lot of those questions, particularly yesterday for us, going into Seguin against TLU, another one of the favorites in the conference, and doing what they did to them. So that will be definitely a heavyweight battle up there in Austin.
And baseball plays Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Softball plays Friday, and then a double header. Besides baseball, softball, and basketball, we've got men's and women's tennis playing on Sunday. Men's tennis is versus McMurray. That's home to McMurray at 10 a.m. Women's tennis is also home to McMurray at 10 a.m. Into the week, there's men's golf at the Savannah International, which is going on throughout the week. And then we've got more softball and baseball in the week, with softball at home to Carnegie Mellon, and baseball they're on the road.
Yeah, Hardin-Simmons.
And then men's tennis is home to Carnegie Mellon next week. Softball is home to Carnegie Mellon next week. And wow, next week is packed. Every single day of the week, something is happening. Women's tennis, home to Gustavus Adolphus College at 5 p.m. Wow, something every day of the week. And then next Friday, women's tennis has MIT at home, and baseball starting their series against McMurray. Lot of stuff going on in the world of Trinity sports. A lot of big stuff as well with the SCAC tournament. What are you expecting to see this weekend, Cole? What are you excited for?
It's uncharted territory, particularly for the women's team, I think. They've been the favorites for so long, back to back to back, reigning SCAC champions. This is their last season in the SCAC, and this is, I believe, their first time not having a bye. They certainly had a bye last season and the one before that, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with their backs against the wall. Not necessarily expected to win for the first time in a while, having to go quote-unquote on the road, even though it is a neutral site, but having to play the extra game nonetheless. It'll be interesting to see what they do, definitely.
All right, so we're going to move into this segment that we have designed that is going to be the bulk of what we do in this podcast, at least to start off with. You know, we might branch away from this in the future, try some new things, but at least for the beginning, this is the bulk. And so in terms of the name of the podcast, it's The Roar Within. And we want to talk about the passion that drives people in sports. So what we're going to be doing is consistently bringing in a guest, a member of the Trinity community. Typically, it'll be a student, but we also might bring in some faculty members. Somebody, though, that has a connection with sports. So probably going to start with a lot of athletes, but we'll branch out to coaches, fans, and people involved in Tiger Network and the filming of games as well. What we're going to interview them about is how they got into sports, their young age at sports, you know, maybe who their fan is. If they're an athlete, it'll probably have something to do with their recruiting, whether they played other sports growing up, right? So we just want to get to know this person and their intimate relationship with sports, why they're passionate about sports, why they love sports. And then after that, we'll move to this second segment where we're going to have a debate that the person that we're interviewing, they're going to bring a debate with them about the larger sports environment that they're passionate about, and we're going to debate the topic with them. But to start off with this first episode, we have no guests. So we're going to interview each other, get to know each other, so that moving forward in this podcast, you know our basis in sports and why we're passionate about sports, and know that at least we're somewhat qualified to be doing this podcast. We'll start with me. If you want to go ahead and do the interview, I lost in drawing straws or whatever, so I'll go first.
All right, well, let's get into it. You've been playing sports for a very long time. You started with soccer. You played soccer at Trinity. You're the captain of the club team now. How did that start?
So growing up, both my parents played sports in college. My dad was a football player at Amherst College in Massachusetts. He ran track and also ran cross country. And my mom was a field hockey player at Colgate. She actually was an All-American and Rookie of the Year. So she's the better athlete. My dad probably would disagree with that. And then, but growing up, there was a high emphasis in my family on being athletic, getting outside and just being involved in sports. So around 4 years old, we moved. I was born in Colorado. We moved to Pennsylvania. And pretty much right when we got to Pennsylvania, that was the first time I was thrust into actually playing sports competitively. Although I don't know if you want to call it competitively at 4 years old, but
Competitive enough.
rec sports. So I played rec soccer and t-ball. I think I was much better at t-ball, you know, consistently going to the all-star game. I definitely enjoyed soccer more, wasn't a big baseball guy, and just stuck with soccer.
Well, that's great. And you kept playing soccer all the way up until here at Trinity University. Just wanted to ask you about that recruitment process, what that was like, why you decided to play soccer, and then ultimately transitioning onto the club side in the position you are now.
Yeah, so coming to Trinity was a interesting decision for me. In terms of my recruiting process, in middle school, I knew that I wanted to play college soccer. It was a goal of mine that I was really ambitious about, and I knew that it was something I wanted to pursue. I did want to play at the D1 level, though, when I was in middle school, and that goal kind of stuck with me maybe more than it should have. I was a little bit more ambitious. I was a firstborn child. My parents didn't really want to tell me no, maybe be more realistic, and I had big dreams. So in terms of the recruiting process in high school, I was shooting for the stars. I was, reaching out to these big schools that, they were giving me responses, but maybe not the most interest. It's also interesting. We went to a small high school. I was 3-year captain at this high school, so it feels like I'm good. I'm a big dog, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe that was a little out of perspective. But it comes to my senior year, and the recruiting process has kind of gone a little stale. I'm not really sure that I'll actually be able to play in college at all, which sucks because that was my dream. I had applied to Trinity and a number of other schools, and having been accepted to Trinity, I was reaching out to Coach Paul McGinley and former assistant coach Edward Carty, just about whether or not I could come here and play. And I had a few phone calls with Coach McGinley, and in the end, he gave me an opportunity. He said, "Come to preseason, and we'll have you out." Unfortunately, as you said, it didn't last. I was on the team for a little bit more than a year. I came to preseason my sophomore year, but I quit after that. And I think the biggest reason, in retrospect, happened before I even got to Trinity. A week before our high school graduation, living in Colorado at the time, there was basically like a blizzard, and I had a soccer game in the middle of this snowstorm. And so ball's quite cold, and it's hard to see, low visibility. I play center back. So goalkeeper punts the ball up in the air. My job, I got to get that back out of there. Don't let the striker get in behind me. And I lost the ball in the snow. It's quite hard. Lands right on the soft spot of my head. And immediately feeling not the best. I was having pulsating pain. When the pain would reach my eyes, kind of black out for a second, I knew pretty much right away that I was concussed. And then recovered, I believed, came to Trinity and just didn't feel myself, didn't feel like I was up to the level that I normally played at. And I didn't know why. I went through the entirety of that fall season. As some of you may know, the Trinity soccer team has a lot of players. So they kind of split us into 2 teams at that time. I was on the second team. And I'm going through this team with an injury. And the way that this team is presented to everybody is, practice hard, you might get to the first team. Basically, every single day felt like a tryout. And so I'm going through this competitive tryout, and I'm injured. I have a concussion that I don't know about. And in the end, I get diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome, which means your concussion symptoms last longer than a normal concussion symptoms do. And so I learned that throughout the course of that season, I had been dealing with dizziness, my vision was off, my spatial awareness was off, all the things that you need to rely on as a soccer player where the game's moving at such a high speed, I didn't have. Especially then making that jump from high school to college with all that going on. I wasn't at that level. So I went to rehab. I tried to get myself back into playing shape and came back for the next year, but I just felt like that stigma around me from just not having been very good because of the injury my freshman year just didn't go away. And I didn't feel at home on the team, and I was starting to lose my love for the game. So I made the decision to transition to the club team. And it's a great decision because I feel like I've fallen more in love with the game than I've ever been in my entire life through being on the club team and just learning to enjoy the game, not for the competition, but instead for the fact that I just love the sport. I think my whole life, I've been in soccer and I've played soccer and enjoyed it because of competition and not because of the sport itself. And I think over the past few years, I've been able to find this love for the sport itself, which has been really, a unique experience, a beautiful experience. And I felt like I've really found myself within this sport. And part of the reason why when the opportunity arose to be a captain, didn't hesitate and reached out. So moving forward, that's going to be me.
It's just a great story, great example of finding your way into why you like the sport. And that's part of why we're doing this podcast, to find out stories like that from other people that come onto the show. So that's good stuff. We're running a little short on time, but just quickly wanted to ask you about your fandom of sports, why you care about sports from a young age.
Yeah.
On the professional side, I know you're wearing Michigan stuff right now, so that's one example.
Yeah. So my dad, I just copied everything with him in sports. He was the guy I watched with. So he was born and went to college in the New England area and grew up in between near Detroit. So I cheer for all the Detroit teams. I cheer for all the Boston teams. Cheer for Michigan. Those are my teams. And then in terms of soccer, which is my sport, growing up at that young age in Pennsylvania on a rec team, I played one year. It was the year when they brought Premier League to the U.S. TV for the first time. They named all the teams after Premier League teams in that season of rec sports to try and get us to actually care about the Premier League. And I was on a team called Chelsea, and Chelsea's been my team ever since.
Well, at least they know it worked for one person. One person does care about Premier League sports, confirmed. Big Chelsea fan. We'll see if it worked for other teammates. I don't know. Maybe eventually. Maybe there'll be a reunion of some kind.
Yeah, I genuinely could not tell you any of my teammates' name. We were like 11 years old maybe at that time. But yeah, Chelsea has definitely grown on me. At first, they were just some team I played for. But I think they have easily become my favorite team in all of sports and really founded my love for soccer, which is why I got involved in the Trinitonian and started writing sports, and why I got involved with Tiger TV and filming of the games and being on the commentary team and color commentary, which I got helped into that. I love it so much. I got helped into it by you, who has experience in commentary. So we'll move to your interview, Cole. When did you decide / get interested in the idea of being a commentator?
Well, I think it was always something in the back of my mind from when I got into sports. I obviously knew I wasn't going to be playing sports. I mean, I wasn't really competing at recess, so a higher professional level probably wasn't really going to happen. So you find a way to. I've always been very big into competition. We did a Clifton strengths exercise not too long ago. One of my classes in competition was like my second highest strength, and that's a very like athlete mindset. So I wanted to find a way to be around like those moments, big games, and being a commentator is definitely a good way to do that. And you get to put spotlights on other people who are having their moment, and I thought that was a really cool thing. So it definitely became more of a possibility in high school. I got involved with the early parts of a broadcast program there, was working behind the scenes, and then came to Trinity and had the opportunity to go on air my freshman year with Brian Yantelson as a color commentator for baseball, and then transitioned to play-by-play when he graduated. And I also do play-by-play for football as well. It's been really great to have that opportunity, and I love doing it. I love getting to know the players, doing the preparation involved. Hopefully, all that time on task helps me be better at what I do.
So you mentioned that maybe growing up you weren't into sports as much as it took me a while to get into sports, really. But I think a lot of people who are involved in sports in the way that we are start their love for it early. And you started even later than I did, and I would say I started late. What really got you into sports?
My dad had always been a big Denver Broncos fan. I had never really been involved in that. I was much more into animals than I was into football. Eventually, I watched a game, and I guess I just found it interesting. I think part of it was also the influence of a lot of people I went to school with. They were all into football. So it was just something I picked up, and then that was the year they won the Super Bowl.
I was going to say.
They win the Super Bowl that
Doesn't
year.
hurt, does it?
It was awesome. You think, oh, it's easy, and then you watch the next 9 years of Broncos football, you realize it's not very easy to even get to the playoffs, apparently.
I mean, I'm a Patriots fan. It seems pretty easy to me.
Yeah, for you, it's probably pretty easy.
Yeah.
Another part of that was I was living in Las Vegas at the time. My last year in Las Vegas was when I was in 8th grade, and that was the first year of the Golden Knights. So I got very into the Golden Knights that year, and a lot of that was because of how they helped the city after the October 1st tragedy, which I believe is still the largest mass shooting in the United States history. They helped our city through a pretty tough time, and I think as somebody who lived there my entire life at that point, felt the need to get behind them and support them, even if I didn't know anything about hockey. I think it took me till about year 2 to fully understand offsides. And, eventually we got there. We're 8 years in. The team's done really well, and we're very proud of them. I know the whole city is.
Yeah. It's another example of a good story on being connected into sports. Another reason, like you said, of like why we want to do this podcast. There are, sports are important to a lot of people, and the passion that comes with a team being founded in the year of a tragedy like that and what they can do for a city, it's just unbelievable. I know, because I went to high school with you, that you have a special connection with somebody inside the NFL. Maybe that would be a good thing to share about your experience in terms of sports.
Well, I've always been fascinated with the NFL schedule. For our high school capstone project, I made like a mock NFL schedule, which was somewhat cheating because I was going to do that anyways, and I just did it for a grade.
You have to understand, by the way, like he's not just saying, "Oh, I made a random." No, the amount of detail that this man puts into making a schedule is unreal.
I just try and mimic their process. They have a lot of computers and stuff that set up things for them. I do it by hand. I try to take into account what they would take into account with national television and bye weeks and everything like that. So for our project, I had to reach out to somebody just to get an interview, and I decided why not shoot for the stars. So I put in a voicemail to the NFL office. I asked for Mike North, who is the person who actually makes the NFL schedule. He's one of the people in charge of that entire process. About a day later, I get a text on my phone saying, "Hey, this is Mike from the NFL. would you like to talk sometime? And that was a pretty cool moment. Just randomly happened on the bus. I still don't think people on the bus know why I was so happy at that moment. But it's just an example of reach out, because you never know.
Yeah. As you've clearly described, your interest in sports is really like behind the scenes in terms of at least your involvement in the game. Where do you see yourself going from here?
Well, I'd like to continue doing play-by-play. That's a big reason why I came here, is because I knew I'd get 4 years on the mic as opposed to maybe going to a D1 school with bigger athletics, but I only get on air my senior year, realistically. There's a lot of competition in there. Tiger Network, it's like a little family. We all know each other. There's really only a few of us involved on the on-air side of things. So we all kind of divide up the sports between the three of us, realistically, and you get 2 a year, essentially, and you can be play-by-play. So I'm in my 3rd year, and I can feel the improvement. I've talked to my boss and other people who listen to my games, and I've gotten a lot better over the 3 years that I've made a jump each of the 3 years. So just continuing to make that jump and get better, and then become a broadcaster that can succeed at the professional level.
I mean, I can tell you this summer when I was starting to get involved because of your advice and your recommendation with the soccer broadcasts and doing color commentary for that. When I had my first meeting with Josh, who's in charge of Tiger Network, he shared that Tiger Network has had a number of people go on to have professional careers in the industry. I forget the number he said, but he said, and we're looking at one more because your friend Cole is destined to be there.
Well,
so.
I really appreciate that. I mean, we have Chris Garciola. He's the current radio announcer for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He was here. He was actually one of the founders, kind of the godfather of Tiger Network. And then Brian Yantelson currently does work with the Missions. So that's at least 2. I know Ryan Figure's also doing stuff with FC Dallas. I think he just got signed on as their permanent radio play-by-play announcer. So we've had a lot of success, and that'd be great if I could be next.
Yeah, and that brings us towards our debate side of things. The way I want to present this interesting topic, as I said at the beginning, we're going to have a interview every week. We're going to have a guest, and this guest will bring a topic. Neither of us are a guest, so neither of us brought a topic, but I have an idea of what we want to talk about. And both of us, at least now, we've become infatuated and extremely interested in the behind-the-scenes side of sports. I think when people think of sports, they often think of the athletes on the field and the athletic ability that goes into that. But I think both of us have an interest in other parts of that, whether it be why the rules are the way they are and the importance of things like that. I know we've had numerous debates about what to do with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and how he keeps getting calls for him, unnecessary roughness-wise. But there's also then, the analytics side of the game and the stuff that coaches do. And as you know, I want to go into coaching moving forward. So I guess the debate I want to pose here is what is the merit of getting into this behind the scenes side of the sports world?
Well, I think there's a lot of merit to it. I mean, because there's so many aspects to it. Behind the scenes, I mean, we talk about like the SIDs that work here, Garrett Landon and Peyton Tebow, Justin Parker, they do a phenomenal job. Behind the scenes makes it happen. I mean, any athlete should be grateful for everything that happens behind the scenes. And I know the ones here are, because they really make the engine run.
Yeah. I think, too, it allows for a diverse audience. And I think, at least in my sport, over recent years, there's been criticism in terms of the fact that people will say, game's gone, it's getting too tactical, it's getting too whatever. I see it, having grown up in the sport, seeing how it's changed. I can see the argument. But I think one of the things that this new aspect of sports does is it allows for a new audience to the game. I think you're a good testament to it, in part that growing up, you didn't necessarily feel like you could be involved in sports in terms of playing, but you found a way to be involved in it. And I think the importance of behind the scenes in sports is that, sport isn't just for the athlete. It's for the fan. It's for the photographer. It's for the filmer. It's for the commentator. It's for the analyst. It's for the coach, right? And to think about all the different ways that people can fall in love with sports. I think growing up, my love of sports came from the love of competition and the desire to win, similar to what you said, your infatuation with competition. But I think as I've grown, my interest in the game and in sports has changed over time. I'm not necessarily as much like, oh, I'm going to be in the gym, I'm going to be doing all that. Like, that's not where my love of the game is anymore. It's in the analytics. It's in what are the little details that I can find to make a competitive advantage. So my mind goes in coaching, right? And I think the fact that it allows for a diverse set of eyes, it allows for a diverse set of taste. I think there's any number of people who can fall in love with sports that maybe haven't fallen in love with sports, and people who have fallen in love with sports that maybe wouldn't have expected to, that have been able to, because of the fact that it is such a broad arena that people just don't recognize a lot of the time how broad it is.
No, I completely agree with that. I think the broader that you can make it, the more people can get involved. I mean, I'm in sports philanthropy class with Jacob Tingle right now, and we're learning about the charitable side of sports. So even opening it up to that, to raising money for foundations, doing good in the community, sports is a part of that as well.
Yeah, and sports are fun. Like people enjoy playing sports, even if it's not at the most competitive level. And in terms of like connecting that to the philanthropy side of things, I'm in education classes. Like I said, I want to coach. And so my realm in a lot of those ways is like thinking about development. I also want to teach. But in some of the classes, you have to get out and get in the field. And in one of the classes I'm in right now, that means volunteering with certain organizations that work with people with diverse needs and disabilities. And so for me, what that's going to look like is I'm going to be volunteering with the Special Olympics. I'm going to be volunteering at Morgan's Wonderland with their sports program, coaching sports and getting involved in soccer there. And again, it's another way, like sports, people think of it at the highest level or think of it as, you're growing up, but it's so much more than that. People continue to play sports after high school. I think a lot of people think you go to high school, you play sports in high school. If you don't go play sports in college, you're done. You stop playing. If you play in college, you don't go to pro, you're done. You stop playing. The only way you can be involved in sports for life is if you go pro and then you're good at pro. So then you get involved after you finish your career. But that's just not true. I mean, I know a wide variety of people who play adult league now and love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I remember talking to Mike North about this, and he said that working in sports is working in the candy store.
Yeah.
There's so many different options, and they're all so fun. If anybody can take one thing away from, I don't know if this is a debate, this is more of a conversation about why it's good to work in sports, but it's good to work in sports. Like if you like it, that you shouldn't shut that off as a career opportunity. I mean, there's so many different ways to get involved in these different organizations at any level.
Yeah.
I mean, that can go from youth sports. They're doing all sorts of great things down there, all the way up to the professional side.
Yeah. And there's a diverse need for people across the entirety of it all. It's just fun, though. And that's kind of why we're doing this podcast. And that's why I chose this as our quote unquote debate, as I do it with my
we'll try to make them more controversial in the future.
Well, yeah, I think hopefully our guests will actually have an idea for a debate. But yeah, no, but this is why we're doing this podcast, because yeah, athletes love sports, and there are many reasons athletes love sports, and that's great. And I want to hear these stories about why people chose Trinity. What's the team dynamic like, right? Family dynamic. How do you win, right? If you're asking a coach, what's the tactical side of your game, right? There's so many different things in that side, but we also have so many fans here and just people who love sports and want to be involved in the industry. And you've got many people at Tiger Network who would be great people to hear their stories. And then there's just fans. There's a lot of fans here. And so just sports are awesome. And it's a passionate topic for a lot of people. And so just learning about that roar within that gets people going, which is sports.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's all we got for you. We'll go ahead and call it here for today, but we will see you next week. Stay tuned. There will be a post coming on the Trinitonian Instagram page that will reveal who our first guest is. Remember, we'll have guests every single episode. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.